Special thanks to Horizon Therapeutics for sponsoring the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast, working tirelessly to research, develop, and bring forward medicines for people living with rare and rheumatic diseases. Discover more about Horizon Therapeutics' mission at horizontherapeutics.com.
This is an angel that God has given us to take care of. And if anything, he's washing away our sins every day if we take care of him, if we provide for him, if we keep him happy. That has been the goal that we've had since then. Make sure Abdullah's healthy, make sure he's taken care of, and make sure he's happy. And it's amazing in doing that, how that's brought joy to our lives.
That's our guest this week, Amjad Farah, a global contractor who has 3 children, including Abdullah, who has epilepsy with cognitive impairment. We'll hear Amjad's family story this week on the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. Say hello to host David Hirsch.
Hi, and thanks for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, Fathers Mentoring Fathers of Children with Special Needs, presented by the Special Fathers Network.
The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we'd be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad.
And now let's hear this compelling conversation between Amjad Farah and David Hirsch.
I'm thrilled to be talking today with Amjad Farah of Livonia, Michigan, a father of 3 who works as a global account director at PPG. Amjad, thank you for taking the time to do a podcast interview for the Special Fathers Network.
Thanks for having me.
You and your wife, Buthayna, been married for 27 years and are the proud parents of 3 children, Amal, 26, Sadallah, 25, and Abdullah, 19, who was diagnosed with epilepsy and moderate to severe cognitive impairment. Let's start with some background. Where did you grow up? Tell me something about your family.
Sure. I was born and raised here in the U.S. My parents were both immigrants. I have 2 brothers, 1 older brother, 1 younger brother, so I am the middle child, which, you know, what that means and all the troubles that I caused my parents growing up. I was born in Pontiac, Michigan, so not too far from where I live now, actually. But, you know, we grew up there. My father was working for General Motors, was going to school, started his own business. Eventually, we moved to a little town in the southern part of Michigan called Temperance, Michigan, which is right on the Toledo, Michigan-Ohio border. Completely different world than Pontiac, right? Two completely very, very different atmospheres. Each have its own benefits and each have their own negatives. But to me, it was a real good blessing to be able to experience both, diverse worlds within this country. But yeah, that's me in my early life, I guess.
Okay. Well, thanks for the quick flyby. I'm sort of curious to know, how would you describe your relationship with your dad?
It's great. I mean, he's still the man. He's still the boss. And what dad says goes, even at 50 years old, I still, whatever my dad tells me to do is what happens. And there's no doubt about that, right? Still, if when I do visit him, it's always, did you call? Did you check in? All those sorts of things. Still treats me like a kid, but it's because of his love for me. But I think that he and I have a special relationship in that while I'm still his son and it's clear that I'm still his son, he views me as a friend. I view him as my friend, and it's a great relationship. I wish we were closer, to be honest, physically.
Well, that's fabulous. So I'm wondering, when you think about your dad, are there any important takeaways, something that you find yourself doing, a lesson that you learned, or a couple lessons that you learned from your dad?
There was so much he taught me, from work ethic to what it means to be a man and take care of your family. My father grew up in a situation that was, not easy. And he essentially became the man of the house, at the age of 4 years old. And his whole life has taken care of everyone around him, his mother, his 2 sisters. He was responsible for them. He took care of them and continued to do, his whole life. He continues to do that as much as he possibly can. And, he taught me what it means to to love your family and care for your family and just be there as a man.
Yeah, well, it is a little bit tragic that his dad, that would have been your grandfather, died at your dad's age 4. And if I remember the story from a previous conversation, your family on your dad's side was from the West Bank.
Yes, correct. My parents, both my parents were from the West Bank, lived in, a little town there called Livonia, which is right outside of Ramallah. And yeah, my grandfather was killed when my father was 4 years old. And he's been, like I said, been the man of the house since then.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of responsibility at such a young age. And it sounds like he's a larger than life figure, not only in your eyes, but maybe the rest of your family's eyes. Because like you said, he's supported his mom, your grandmother, and his sisters, who would be your aunts. And, he's the center of gravity, when it comes to, people that look for support in your family. And what a great role model.
Yeah.
And that he's still alive.
Yeah.
That you still have a strong relationship with him.
Yeah. So, just to be clear, my one aunt did get married and her husband took care of her, obviously, they lived their lives. But my youngest aunt, who passed away a few years ago, my father took care of her his whole life, right? It was no question about it. That was his responsibility. And it was what he was expected to do. And he just did it. There was never complained, never a question about it at all.
Yeah, well, I love the strong family values that you're talking about and that, hopefully that you're living by as well, the responsibility that comes along with that.
Yeah, I try.
I'm sort of curious to know your grandfather on your mom's side. Did you know him at all?
I did know him. I did not know the grandfather on my father's side. So my grandparents all, lived in the Middle East when I was here. So, but I did see my mom's father, a few times when I was young, but he passed away of cancer when I was still young. So I remember him. I remember him fondly. He is buried here in the U.S. because that's where he passed away. And I still go to his grave every opportunity I have to read a small prayer for him. But I don't have, strong memories of him, just a few.
I'm wondering if there's any other father figures, any other men that played an influential role in your life as you were growing up.
There's always people that I've learned from. There are so many great fathers in our communities, in our world. I've tried to learn from all of them. And there's certainly people that I work with. There's my brothers, there's my cousins. My uncle in particular was, there's maybe a controversial figure because he was a bit of a hothead, and he's my mom's brother. But he passed away a few years ago. We buried him next to his father. But he was one that the reason that he sticks out in my mind is when Abdullah was young and we first started recognizing he had problems, he was one of the ones in our family that really just embraced him and was just like, nope, bring him to every event, bring him to everything, don't try to hide him. Don't not bring him because you're worried that he's going to act out or something like that. And he really went out of his way to embrace our son and all of his challenges. And so I'll always remember that of him. My mom's other brother was also a great father, is a great father, and I love him with all my heart. So my uncles, my dad has a few cousins that I view more as uncles than his cousins that are all great fathers. We call them Amal, on my father's side. And so Amal Ahmad, Amal Mahir, who passed away, there's a lot there that when I think about them, I actually start to tear up because I know how much they love me and how they've expressed that love. And by extension, they've loved my whole family, and my kids know them and love them. And it's been fantastic.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Thank you for sharing. So my recollection was that you went to University of Toledo, got a degree in chemistry as an undergrad, and then also did some graduate work at University of Phoenix in marketing. And I'm wondering, where did your career start and how has it transpired?
So where did my career start? My career started, as you said, I got a degree in chemistry, and then I went to work for a waste treatment company. That was really manual sort of labor. And from there, I went to a plating company, again, manual lab sort of work. And then really, I would say my career started when I got an opportunity to work for a big company. The name of the company was BASF, big company, a global chemical company. I started it again in the lab there, was there for 17 years, did a lot of different things and learned a lot of different things. And they gave me the opportunity to grow and challenge myself and do different things. Since then, I've worked for two other companies. Most currently, as you know, with PPG. In between BASF and PPG, I worked for AkzoNobel, all sort of coatings companies. I love color, and I think that's part of why the reason I stayed in coatings. But it's also because it's given me the opportunity to go from, like I said, a chemist in the lab to working in manufacturing environment, to working in quality systems environment, to working in, a commercial type role and field technical roles, and just to try so many different things. It's been very exciting. And, I'm thankful for all three companies that I've worked for that have given me those opportunities.
That's fabulous. So I'm sort of curious to know, how did you and Buthayna meet?
As we already kind of covered, my grandfather on my father's side died very young. Both my grandparents on my mother's side, I knew them, but they also died when I was very young. And so the one surviving grandparent I had for most of my life was my grandmother, who lived in the Middle East, and grandmother on my father's side. And after I graduated school, and before I started working even for BASF, I went to visit her. She was sick. She was in the hospital and she wasn't feeling well. Now, I should preface it by saying that it was at a time where, in our culture, my dad was like, well, you're finished with school. You decided you don't want to go to graduate school, so it's time to get you married, right? and so we were going to a bunch of functions and events and looking for, the one. And I was having trouble seeing what I was looking for, and I didn't know what I was looking for, quite frankly. But then when my grandmother got sick, we went there to visit her. My father and I went together, and that trip, while it didn't end the way I would wanted it to, was a real bonding moment for my father and I. Typical, I was a teenager, headstrong young man that was bucking against my father for a lot of years. And at the age of 21, when we went on that trip together, we didn't have the greatest relationship. And during that trip, we really, really bonded, and I think that's what's carried us through. But back to the story, I was there. My grandmother was very ill, and it was clear that she wasn't going to survive. So the hospital had us take her home. We set up a hospital bed for her. And there was this young lady that would come in. I thought she was a nurse at first, right? She'd come in and she'd take care of my grandmother and she'd leave, and, didn't really think much of it. And then it took me a while to realize that she was actually the daughter of my father's best friend. And she was there between school and everything else. She was coming in and taking care of my grandmother on her free time. Certainly, I noticed she was pretty, right? But it was the person, right? And that was there. And without getting into too much detail of the story, on the morning of September 14th, 1993, which was my birthday, I woke up. My grandmother said, she looked like she was coming out of it, right? And she was the only one that remembered it was my 21st birthday, 22nd birthday. And she wanted pictures and she wanted everything else. But as the day progressed, she started to decline. And she said, call everybody so I could say goodbye, because today's the day I'm going to die.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so, the town loved my grandmother. Everyone rallied around her. Everyone came to say goodbye to her. And I just remember sitting at the foot of my grandmother's bed while Buthayna, who, like I said, I didn't really know, was sitting at the head of her bed, and she was reading Quran. And I can't do it justice, so I'm not going to try. But if you hear somebody that is good at reading Quran, it's a beautiful sound. And so here's this young girl reading Quran at the head of my grandmother's bed with tears streaming down her face. And I just looked at her and I said, that's the girl I'm going to marry. And I just knew at that moment. And so even though my grandmother passed away and everything else, it took some time. We got around to it eventually. But, it's my grandmother that brought us together. And it was the heart of Buthayna that shined. That is what attracted me to her.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful story. It gave me chills. I have tears in my eyes, and I'm speechless. It's a beautiful thing. And I've heard other people say this. Well, you didn't mention this. It's like an angel appears. Right?
Yeah.
Buthayna is the angel.
Absolutely.
In your grandmother's life. It's very emotional. Let's switch gears and talk about special needs. So I'm sort of curious to know, prior to Abdullah's diagnosis, did you or Buthayna have any exposure to special needs?
I would say, like a lot of people in this world, not really, right? We knew that they existed. We knew there was people out there with special needs. We had compassion for people's special needs. but it wasn't something that we were really involved in or, that we knew about, quite frankly.
So I'm sort of curious then, how did Abdullah's diagnosis come about? What's the backstory?
So we were living in the Pocono Mountains at the time, actually, and wanting to move back home to Detroit. So Abdullah was only a few months old. He had just been born when I really wanted to move back to the Detroit area. Had relocated out there for work and was moving back for work. So I was actually in the Detroit area looking for housing. It was in the winters, December of 2002. And Abdullah had his first seizure. So prior to that, we didn't know of anything wrong with him, right? We thought maybe he wasn't good at eating. There were some issues there, but generally speaking, everything seemed to be okay. But again, very hard to tell at that early stage in life, right? Mm-hmm. So he had a seizure. I went home. The doctors at the time, it wasn't like there was a lot of specialists in the Poconos, right? And the doctor said, oh, well, it was probably just, due to a spike in his fever. And my wife, and I should have listened to her, right? She insisted that he didn't have a fever and that it never happened. And they said, oh, well, you just didn't notice it. And they kind of, quite frankly, blew her off. And I did too, because the doctor said that was the case. So I just went with it. A few weeks later, while I was back in Detroit, again, looking for a home, he had another seizure. So that became the beginning of our journey, really. Medications, trying to figure out the seizures. As he progressed in age, recognizing that there was other issues that we had to deal with, taking a long time to get him diagnosed with anything, right? Which was a challenge, because without a diagnosis, insurance doesn't want to cover things, so it was a challenge, and we didn't really know where to turn for guidance, right?
So was there some important advice that you got from the medical community or from others that you are meeting that helped you determine the situation and move forward?
I would say the best guidance we got was from Abdullah's pediatrician. She was the pediatrician for all my kids at the time, and she's since retired. Her name was Dr. Mary Alonzi, and she connected us with the Early On organization here in Michigan, which is the Early On Intervention educational programs that would come to the house and help us, and really started getting us involved and understanding, that this was going to be a lifelong journey, and that we had resources at hand that we didn't think about before. So Dr. Alonzi was the key to opening those doors for us, to understanding that there was assistance out there. I will say that we didn't kick those doors down. We were uncertain. Do we really need the help? Do we really, shouldn't this go to somebody that's more in need than we are? And a little bit embarrassed to ask for support and help, and certainly didn't want to take any financial support, which we didn't, but not recognizing that, we do need other help, right? And it took us a while to kind of get through that.
Yeah, well, thanks for your authenticity. And, I don't know that it's straight out denial, but, if you're a glass half full type of person, you want to remain optimistic. And maybe this is just a phase, right? That, you have to get by. And then you come to the conclusion or reality that, hey, maybe there's something more consequential here, and we need to dig in, right? We need to be a little bit more focused on what our alternatives are. And I'm wondering if there were some important decisions looking back that you made that have assisted Abdullah or have been important for your family.
For me, a turning point for me personally, I guess, would be a time, and I'll credit my daughter, who was 9 years old at the time, for this. Abdullah was really struggling. Doctors used to tell us, and thankfully, he's 19 years old and he's healthy and he's happy, and, he's darn near 6 foot, 180 pounds. So there's, he's a child at heart. He's a child, and so, what I'm going to say doesn't really matter right now. But at the time, because of the seizures and the frequency and the challenges, when he was very young, the doctors told us, he might not live to see 5 years old.
Oh my.
And I remember one time in particular, he was about 3, his daughter, my daughter, his sister was about 9. And she's sitting with me, and, she was crying because he was really struggling at that time. And, his mother was with him in the hospital, and I was trying to watch the other kids. And she just all of a sudden stopped crying. It was just a sudden stop. And I thought at first that she had gone into some sort of shock or something. And, Ahmad, are you okay? Are you okay? What's going on? She says, no, I just realized something. I said, what's that? She says, Allah or God had to give Abdullah to somebody. And he gave him to us because he knows that we're strong enough to take care of him. There's no more reason to cry, because if Allah knows that we're strong enough to take care of him, then we are.
Wow. And
that was a big turning point for me, and recognizing, that there's a bigger picture here, right? And that's, out of mouths of babes, right? So, she was, from that moment on, she was like a second mother to him. And his brother is absolutely, the pillars on which Abdullah has grown and succeeded, and getting his siblings involved in his life and making them feel important part of his life has really been maybe the biggest success factor we've had.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. Very touching story. And in addition to the mouths of babes, I think it's a great testimony to your faith, right? That your daughter at such a young age would come to that realization.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very powerful. So not to focus on the negative, but to be authentic, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you and your family have encountered?
There are still, Abdullah looks like a normal kid, or normal young man. At 19, he's a young man. He's not a kid anymore. If you didn't know him, you just saw him from a distance, you wouldn't expect him to behave anything other than like a normal person. But, he'll still have his breakdowns and his tantrums occasionally. And the same situation when he was younger. Try and take him out in public when there's, those sorts of stigmas. People expect him to be normal, and then all of a sudden he's not, and you get the looks, and you get the different things. So that was one situation, but that really didn't ever really truly bother us. It didn't inhibit us, right? Because it's like, that's their problem, not ours. But that is something that we faced. Beyond that, just navigating through the medical system is certainly not easy. You get a lot of different opinions, a lot of different suggestions, and knowing who you can trust and who's just trying to, make an extra little buck or do an extra test, is a challenge. But, it's your son, and you're going to do everything you can within your power to help him. And I think, generally speaking, the people are honest and forthright in wanting to help. But there's a few out there that are in it for ulterior motives. But, being able to define that and get through that has been a challenge. Probably playing on the hopefulness a little bit too much, right? That if we do this test, we're going to find something, and there's going to be this miracle drug, and everything's going to be okay, when that's really not what that, the situation and the reality is. But working through that, getting through that, navigating as he's gotten older, navigating the paperwork. I'll just leave it at paperwork that needs to be done, to make sure that you can still take care of an adult child of yours, right? That can't take care of himself. So that has been a challenge and a lesson, and we've had a lot of great support and guidance and getting through that. But without that, we would have been lost.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. I'm sort of curious to know if you've gotten seizure control or if he still has seizures.
He still has occasional breakthrough seizures. His seizures are, I would say, relatively under control. He will have a seizure every few months. He'll still have one. But generally speaking, I would say under control, but it's never, they're still there, right? They're not gone away.
So is it accurate to say then that his moderate to severe cognitive impairment would be the biggest challenge if the seizures are mostly under control?
Yeah, I would say that at this point, it's the cognitive impairment.
Okay.
And, you say challenge, and I just want to be clear. It is a challenge, but it's absolutely a blessing. This kid is just as happy as can be, right? He's so innocent and he brings so much joy into this life. And everyone in our house rushes home, right? I mean, as we said, I have two other brothers and they have children, and watching their kids grow up and watching my cousin's kids grow up and everything else, everyone gets to a point in their lives where they want to leave and they don't want to come home, right? My kids probably feel the same way, but they want to come home to not be with me, not be with their mother, but to be with Abdullah, right? None of us can go any length of time without seeing Abdullah and hearing his laughter and seeing his smile.
Yeah, I love it. One of the questions I had, and I think you've already answered it, which is what impact has Abdullah's situation had on his older siblings, your marriage, or the rest of your family for that matter?
Yeah, he's really, I think, matured his brother and sister early, right? Probably beyond their years. And one of the challenges that I have had as a parent is making sure that they feel it's okay for them to go live their lives, right? Abdullah's my responsibility. And while we value you and we value the help you brought, he's mine and Buthayna's responsibility. He's not Ahmad's responsibility. He's not Sadallah's responsibility. And I want them to live their lives and get them to understand that the best way they can help their brother in the long term is to live a happy, fulfilling life now, so that when the time comes, they can step in and help.
Yeah, that's fabulous. How about the extended family?
Extended family has been, there's been challenges for sure. There's some of the cultural issues, right? And maybe stigmas and things of that nature. But generally speaking, we have very supportive extended family. I mean, again, brothers, their spouses, my cousins have been fantastic. So I have, in particular, a couple cousins. One's a doctor. His name's Ahmad Farah, and his sister, Dina, who are both children of that uncle I was telling you about earlier, that, have really, just always been there, been very supportive in the simplest of ways. And that they don't treat Abdullah different, right? They treat him like he's one of the kids in the family. And that's all we can hope for, right? And so, yeah, we've had a great support system around us. So we've been very lucky.
That's very fortunate. Thank you for sharing. So I'm thinking about supporting organizations, and I'm wondering what organizations have played an important role in your family's life.
Well, clearly early on, it was what they called early on here in Michigan. And I know in every state there's something like it, and it's called something different in every state. But, recognizing that Abdullah needed additional support and education from an early age, coming to the house to help him, to train us how to provide, physical, occupational, and speech therapies to him, working through him all through school. As he got older, right? Organizations like the ARC of Northwest Wayne County, providing resources and classes and education for us, but also, helping us get involved in things like Special Olympics, right? Abdullah loves sports, right? So, that he gets to go play soccer, and then he gets to go, because we got involved in soccer, then all of a sudden there was an organization called the Miracle League that we got involved with. So he got to go play baseball. He's probably not the biggest baseball fan, but he likes to have those young ladies come out and support him and volunteer. He does like to flirt with the girls. So, or bowling. He loves bowling. Basketball, right, when he was in school. So those sorts of activities he really, really enjoys. And, so the ARC was a big part of that. But probably the one that's most important to us and one that really has touched us from a spiritual level and from a personal level is Muhsin, which I know you're familiar with. And, they really have brought a lot of joy to our lives and, helped us in areas that we were struggling with Abdullah.
There's a number of different programs that Muhsin has, and I'm wondering, what is it, the program that they have where you get to go on a spiritual journey?
Yeah, they have the Umrah trip. So in Islam, we have one of the 5 pillars of Islam is that if you are financially, physically capable to make a pilgrimage, which we call Hajj, to Mecca, Saudi Arabia, once in your lifetime. So my wife and I had done the pilgrimage to Hajj in 2014, but we'd always wanted to take Abdullah to Saudi Arabia. They have Hajj, which is, at a set time, set set schedule. But then they also have what they call Umrah, which are smaller visits, if you will, during, throughout the year. We always wanted to take Abdullah. It's a very spiritual experience. And we were always worried that we were just never going to be able to, right? Because how are we going to do it? How are we, with these crowds, how are we going to manage him? Abdullah, he's kind of outgrown it now, but he did have a tendency to wander. He was given the nickname Houdini by the hospital when he was younger. So he is a bit of an escape artist. And so we were very worried about, this foreign country, big crowds, what if he had a seizure in the midst of this, things of that nature. And when Mohsen came with their Umrah trip, for people with special needs and their families, we jumped on the first one. The very first one they did, we jumped on it and we took Abdullah, and it was everything we'd hoped it would be, and then some. And it was a blessing because it was even blessed more because of Abdullah and all the people like Abdullah that were with us on the trip. But Mohsen, fantastic job, got some really great young people to volunteer so that, instead of me being worried about what's going on with Abdullah, I could focus on my worship. And they took Abdullah, but Abdullah was there every step of the way. He did every one of the acts of worship. He loved being there, and he still remembers it fondly, right? And he wants to go back, and one day we will go back again with Mohsen for sure.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Thanks for sharing. It has sort of a look and feel of like a Make-A-Wish trip, right? Something that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do if it wasn't for, in this case, Mohsen, to be able to coordinate, organize that, the volunteers. It just makes it an all-around better experience than trying to, pull that off on your own, if you will.
Absolutely. We would have been lost trying to figure out, okay, how do we coordinate these special resources that Mohsen did for us? And, they organized it so well, and it was so well done. I mean, for anybody that's out there that is thinking about doing this trip and worried about it, please reach out to Mohsen. You will not regret it. It was fantastic. I just can't say enough about it. It was just fantastic.
Thanks for sharing. So I'm sort of curious to know what role has spirituality played on your journey?
Well, we talked about it a little bit. My wife is much stronger than I am, as is typical, right? The woman is always stronger than the man. Early on, she had no waivers, right? She was right there. I will admit that I had waivers, right? Some of the cultural aspects, the religion is one thing, and then the culture is another. And some of the cultural aspects peeked in, and I started saying, well, what did I do? Why is my child being punished? Did I do something? And I think there was probably others in my family that thought the same thing. And it took me a bit, but through the strength of my wife and through my daughter and that story that I told earlier, that brought me around to saying, this is not a punishment. This is not a curse. This is not anything wrong. This is an angel that God has given us to take care of. And if anything, he's washing away our sins every day if we take care of him, if we provide for him, if we keep him happy. And that has been the goal that we've had since then, right? Is make sure Abdullah's healthy, make sure he's taken care of, and make sure he's happy. And it's amazing in doing that, how that's brought joy to our lives.
Very powerful. Thank you for sharing. I'm thinking about advice now, and I'm wondering if there's a word of wisdom or two that you can share with a dad, perhaps that's closer to the beginning of his journey with a recent diagnosis or in a similar situation to your own.
Yeah, don't be shy about reaching out. We've been through it. There's a lot of us out there, and I think we don't talk about it openly enough. I noticed, for example, PPG, the current employer that I work for, has started an employee resource network to talk about, special abilities, and not just for employees, but for family members. And so being a part of that employee resource network has opened up, discussions, right, that we wouldn't normally have. And again, just reach out, find somebody. There's people out there. Go to find your local ARC, work with your local ARC. I think they all pretty much offer the same series of courses that are very informative, very educational, and help. And don't wait. Don't wait until they're 14 or 15 to start working on, the things that you need when they become 18. Start working on those things early, get it all planned, and just make life easier for yourself.
Yeah, if I can paraphrase what you've said, err on the side of engaging and be intentional, right,
Yeah.
about your efforts, and don't let your ego or your pride get in the way, and accept assistance, right, which I think is really difficult for men, not necessarily various cultures, but it's just the way that men are wired, right? We're going to try to figure it out on our own, right? And, it's a strength in one area and a liability in another area. So I'm sort of curious to know, why is it you've agreed to be a mentor father as part of the Special Fathers Network?
Well, I as you know, David, I thought about it for a long time. It wasn't like, we had our first conversation actually quite some time ago, and I had to think through it, right? And, am I qualified? Am I the right person to do this? And then I realized, well, who would have I asked? Who is it that I would have gone to and asked? And it would have been somebody that's been through it, right? And, if I'm going to do that, and I continue to do that, I want to make sure that they felt they had somebody they could, the next guy had somebody they could talk to. So it was not an easy decision for me to take, because it's a responsibility, right? And I didn't want to take it too lightly. Having been through it, you want to help, right? You want to help wherever you can. And it sometimes doesn't take any more than just having somebody to talk to, right?
Absolutely. Well, we're thrilled to have you. Thank you for being part of the network. And I'm sort of curious to know if there's anything you'd like to say before we wrap up.
No, I guess the only thing I would say is, while the journey is not always easy, right? It truly is, having a child with special needs truly is a blessing. We're lucky in that Abdullahs are easily managed. I know that there's people out there that their children are, need a lot more care than Abdullah does, but regardless, it's always a blessing. I mean, the innocence and the joy that these children have, they always say that those that have the least are the most generous. And you can translate that into the situation with a lot of these people with special abilities that have every reason to be, depressed or upset at the world, are the most joyful people. And you just want to surround yourself with them.
Yeah, there's an important lesson there. Thank you for emphasizing that. Well, let's give a special shout out to Juhi Tahir with Musin for helping connect us.
Yeah, thank you, Juhi.
If somebody wants to contact you, what would be the best way to go about doing that?
Yeah, the best way to contact me is through my email. And they can contact me with my first name, AMJAD, last name, FARAH, the number 5 at gmail.com. You can also connect to me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect. So I think those are probably the two best ways to get a hold of me.
Excellent. Well, we'll be sure to include those in the show notes, so we'll make it as easy as possible for people to follow up. Amjad, thank you again for taking the time and many insights. As a reminder, Amjad is just one of the dads who's part of the Special Fathers Network, a mentoring program for fathers raising a child with special needs. If you'd like to be a mentor father or are seeking advice from a mentor father with a similar situation to your own, please go to 21stcenturydads.org. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. As you probably know, the 21st Century Dads Foundation is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, which means we need your help to keep our content free to all concerned. Would you please consider making a tax-deductible contribution? I would really appreciate your support. Amjad, thanks again.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children match up with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support other dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we would be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad. Also, please be sure to register for the Special Fathers Network bi-weekly Zoom calls held on the first and third Tuesdays of every month. Lastly, we're always looking to share interesting stories. If you'd like to share your story or know of a compelling story, please send an email to david@21stcenturydads.org.
The Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast was produced by me, Tom Couch. Thanks again to Horizon Therapeutics, who believe that science and compassion must work together to transform lives. That's why they work tirelessly to research, develop, and bring forward medicines for people living with rare and rheumatic diseases. Discover more about Horizon Therapeutics at horizontherapeutics.com.